She was born in a small German town, where time seemed to drag, thick and suffocating, and the air carried the sense of fresh bread, wax, old wood and damp stone. Her family was deeply religious, devout Catholics who believed that suffering purified the soul, that darkness walked silently alongside faith, and that demons could seep into human bodies if the heart harbored even a hint of impurity. From the very beginning, Anneliese's life was framed by discipline, prayer, and a pervasive sense that evil lurked just beyond human perception. As a child, she was quiet, obedient, and unusually introspective. She preferred books to play, absorbing tales of saints, angels, and battles between light and dark. But even as a little girl, she noticed things that unsettled her. Shadows moved when no one else was looking. Dark stains appeared on the ceiling, slowly forming shapes that resembled faces, mouths open in silent screams. At night, these faces would shift and twist, growing sharper and more defined, whispering her name. She would wake drenched in sweat, the sense of eyes watching her from the darkness of the room impossible to shake. Her first seizure came at 16. She was sitting in class when her body suddenly froze, heavy as stone. Her tongue refused to move. Her limbs were paralyzed. Her heart raced while a weight pressed down on her chest, crushing her from the inside out. She could feel an unseen presence atop her, a shadow that wrapped itself around her, constricting her lungs and ribs. Doctors diagnosed temporal lobe epilepsy and prescribed medication. At first, it seemed the attack was occasional, but soon they escalated into something far stranger, far more terrifying. Within months, the voices began. They were not mere thoughts or hallucinations. They were commands, insidious whispers that wormed into her mind and refused to leave. "You are cursed," they said. "Your soul belongs to us." She began seeing dark silhouettes in the corners of her room, forms without clear edges, always moving, always watching. At night, she could feel them pressing against her, cold and heavy, whispering indecipherable words that vibrated through her chest, leaving her gasping and shivering. She began to claim that she could see hell itself. In her visions, it was a vast expanse of shadow and twisted forms. Faces without eyes stared, mouths opening impossibly wide, their whispers lashing at her mind. "You belong to us. We are in your head. Your body is our temple." She could feel their touch on her skin, invisible hands brushing, digging, burning, freezing, sensations that made her body jerk and convulse. The voices inside her multiplied, overlapped, and argued with one another, each one distinct, each one malevolent. She said there were 6 demons inside her, each with a separate personality, each demanding obedience and each relishing her terror. Prayer, once a source of comfort, became torture. When she knelt and recited the Lord's Prayer, her body would shake violently. Her voice warped from her own to something deep and guttural, sometimes low and threatening, other times a whisper that seemed to emanate from her chest, layered with voices not her own. She would laugh, then cry, then growl like an animal, as if her body were no longer hers to command. Medications, antidepressants, antipsychotics, brought no relief. She stopped eating, insisting the demons forbade it. Food smelled of rot, water tasted of blood. She spent hours on her knees performing endless bows, her knees raw and bleeding, her skin pale and drawn tight over protruding bones. She slept on the cold floor, drank her own urine, sometimes ate spiders she found in the corners of the house. Her voices intertwined with those of the demons, echoing and answering one another. She spoke in multiple tones at once, as though she were 6 people speaking through one fragile body. Her parents were desperate. Doctors were helpless. They turned to the church. Permission for an exorcism was granted after long deliberation. 2 priests began the ritual. The first session lasted for hours. Anneliese screamed in a way that made the walls vibrate. Her body arched unnaturally. Her spine seemed to lift off the floor. Her mouth opened impossibly wide. Her voice shifted between tones, sometimes guttural, sometimes whispering, sometimes high and brittle. She spat, hissed, growled, froze mid-motion, staring into the corners of the room as if unseen eyes were fixed on her. The room itself seemed alive. A sulfurous, decaying smell filled the air, though nothing burned. Candles melted strangely, their flames licking upward, casting dark, writhing shadows across the walls that moved independently of the light. Sometimes the walls creaked and groaned as if something invisible paced the room. Shadows thickened as if solid, curling around corners, pressing against furniture, lingering near the priests. On the recordings, the shadows seem almost audible, a soft shifting like whispers brushing against the microphone, waiting. The exorcisms continued for months, over 60 sessions. Hundreds of bows, cries, and fits of contortion. Her weight plummeted. Eyes hollowed. Face shadow-like. She would insist that she had to suffer, that her death was a sacrifice for others. But the darkness was no longer confined to Anneliese's body. It seeped into the room itself, thickening the air, pressing against the walls as if the very house had become alive. The priests reported shadows moving without source, curling along the edges of furniture, gathering in corners. Sometimes the temperature would shift suddenly. One part of the room icy cold, another unbearably warm, as if the elements themselves were bending under the presence of something unseen. Neighbors claimed they could hear screaming from behind locked doors, yet when they approached, silence greeted them, deep and oppressive. Her body convulsed violently as though something inside sought to escape. Voices overlapped, hers, the demon's, sometimes more than one at a time. She sometimes spoke as multiple entities simultaneously, each with a distinct tone, pitch, and malevolent intent. She claimed she could see black forms sitting silently in the corners, eyes invisible but always watching. Her spine arched to impossible angles, her limbs bent unnaturally. Every motion was a battle between her will and the entities inhabiting her body. Her skin grew pale, translucent, veins like threads of shadow crawling beneath it. The exorcisms continued. Candles flickered in unnatural patterns, flames dancing upward, bending as if windless currents of unseen energy manipulated them. The priests recited prayers in Latin, their voices steady but strained, sweat pouring down their faces. Yet the darkness responded. A cold draft would sweep the room, carrying whispers that weren't theirs, mocking them, echoing from the walls themselves. Sometimes the floorboards creaked, though no one stepped there. Sometimes the furniture seemed to shift imperceptibly, corners of rugs lifting as if something moved beneath. Her cries became a language of torment and despair, alternating between a child's scream, a guttural growl, a whispered chant that seemed older than human memory. Each session left the room heavier, air thick with a weight you could almost touch, pressing down on anyone who entered. Her knees were raw from endless bows, yet she continued without pause, each movement a plea and a punishment intertwined. With each day the shadows grew bolder. They stretched from corners, pooling along the walls, creeping toward the center of the room during the night. Sometimes she would scream in terror at nothing visible, convulsing as if unseen hands gripped her chest and arms, twisting her with deliberate strength. The priests would hold her down, reciting prayers, but even their presence seemed fragile against the palpable force pressing in on them. Her parents watched in silent horror, torn between faith and fear, unable to intervene. Their desperation was mirrored in her cries, pleading, screaming, whispering in tones that sometimes seemed alien. Each session was a microcosm of hell. Each night, the house itself seemed to breathe with the presence of entities that hungered for attention, watching every flicker of candlelight, every subtle twitch of Anneliese's body. Sometimes she would fix her gaze on a wall, eyes wide, and whisper things no one could understand. Her voice layered itself over her own words, creating a chorus of overlapping tones, low guttural hums, shrill whispers and growls. The priests reported that it was as though 6 separate beings spoke through her at once, arguing, laughing, cursing, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in chaotic discord. The darkness also began to infiltrate the senses of those present. A pungent smell of sulfur and rot would rise unexpectedly. Shadows seemed to linger longer than they should, and even in bright daylight, small corners of the room appeared unnaturally dark, almost solid. The weight in the air was oppressive, making breathing laborious. Every heartbeat of anyone nearby felt magnified, echoing as if in a hollow chamber where sound itself had become a conduit for fear. Anneliese's condition worsened. Her cries became intermittent, replaced at times by eerie whispers as if the demons were conversing among themselves through her. Her body would arch backward suddenly, her hands clawing at the floor, walls, or the air itself. Her voice sometimes emitted a low, continuous hum that seemed to resonate with the walls, vibrating the floorboards. Candles would shatter without touch, shadows thickened into shapes that seemed semi-solid, moving with a slow, deliberate intention. On July 1, 1976, Anneliese died. Her body, skeletal and fragile, had become a vessel emptied of vitality. Weight barely 30 kilograms, she succumbed to exhaustion and dehydration. Her parents and the priests were later convicted of negligent homicide, though the events themselves defied rational explanation. Yet the recordings endure. Listening to them in a dimly lit room evokes an immediate, visceral chill. Her voice shifts and overlaps, sometimes two tones simultaneously. Whispers seem to come from all around, brushing the listener's awareness. Skeptics attribute it to epilepsy, psychosis, or religious hysteria, but even modern psychiatrists concede that something extraordinary occurred. The story transcends demons. It is a meditation on the thin boundary between mind, faith, and fear. Darkness does not need to enter from outside. It grows inside, imperceptibly, until it fills every corner of consciousness. Listening in a dark room, one feels the presence of those 6 lingering voices. Shadows stretch beyond candlelight, twisting and moving just out of sight. The air thickens and presses on the chest, each breath a labor. Floorboards creak, cloth rustles, and every tiny sound becomes amplified, magnified, distorted. The darkness waits, patient, relentless. It brushes against the mind, pressing into every corner. The horror begins subtly, a chill down the spine, a fleeting shadow at the edge of vision, a whisper that seems just out of reach. It grows slowly, inexorably. Air thickens, corners darken, walls seem to breathe. The unseen presence watches, biding its time. The voices shift, overlap, argue. Layered over her own, they form something ancient, low, predatory, older than humanity itself. Something eternal. Eventually, one understands, if they dare, that the darkness no longer needs her body. It has found space in the mind, lingering beyond the light, feeding on doubt, fear, or faith. And in that moment you realize, the shadow waits for you. Patient, eternal, watching.